Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantles, and it is hot here. It is very hot. I have to keep my blinds closed most of the time because it's not as hot as it was back in my university room. But I think one of the big problems there was because my window faced the sun, and my side of the building was in the sun, and so the light coming into my room was basically, and on the walls outside my room, was basically heating up my entire room, and so I had to try and keep the blinds closed for a lot of the time because it was so hot. And I have to do something similar at home because it is so hot here. It's definitely quite a difference compared to winter, where it can be absolutely freezing here. It's very strange. Global warming, everyone. It's global warming. Yeah, I've got a new rosary. It came earlier this week, and I'm wearing it now because my other one broke. So I've got a new rosary here. Okay, that's tangled up. These things always get tangled up. I've got a new rosary. It's a little bit thinner here, but there's the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's a metal and stuff. I quite like this design of crucifix on. Let's see. Can you see that? Can you focus maybe? No. Okay, well, it's a bit blurry. I apologize for that. Basically, it's the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit on that, and it's also in Polish on the back. It's got Polish writing. So yeah. One downside I have found of this recently is that this is made of copper. And the reason why I know it's made of copper is because when I was going to shower yesterday, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, I noticed something green on my shoulder here. And it turns out that this thing, this metal bead here, because this is all wood except for beads like this. This is metal. This one has started oxidizing on my neck, which means that there's now a green. Well, there was. I hope it's gone now. There was a green spot on my neck, basically. It reminds me of the time when I was in secondary school, and there was this girl who was, for some reason, she was wearing this copper ring. By the end of the day, her entire finger was completely dark green from the copper. So, it's still not going to stop me wearing it. It means that I'm just going to look like I've turned into the Hulk or something after a few hours of wearing this. But it's a really nice crucifix. I'm really glad I have this one. I have another one slightly similar to this, but it's not silver, but it's silver in color. Something I have found lately on Etsy is when people they sell books in bundles. So no, I'm not necessarily talking about physical books. I mean, they do sell physical books in bundles, but something I've been finding a lot lately is when people sell them in PDF files, and they sell huge quantities of these. And hence the title of this video. Collectively, from Etsy, I've now bought 1,882 books, which is definitely quite a lot. Among them are almost over 100 copies of the Bible, based in, I think. The problem with the copies of the Bible I have, one of the cool things and the problems with them that I have now, is it's not literally just like copying and pasting text. No, these are scans. So it means that not only do I have scans of these ancient Bibles, but they're in languages I don't understand. So I've got more modern translations. I've got Syriac translations, Greek translations, Aramaic translations, and I have no clue what they say. But they look quite cool. I can maybe show a picture of them at some point. I also have a copy of the what's known as the Devil's Bible, and it's called that. I think it's a Codex Gigas or something. It's known as the Devil's Bible because there's a giant, strange picture of the devil in the middle of it, it makes him look funny. Other books I've bought were the various copies of the There were ancient Christian books, which were, I think, they're the works of stuff like the Church Fathers, and also a ton. I think I got 154 ancient books that were at one point investigated for being part of the biblical canon. They didn't make the actual canon, but they were considered. So they're apocryphal, which means that although their authorship isn't debated, they're still not decided as divinely inspired. And then pseudepigraphical, which means that they were never considered inspired and their authorship is debated. For instance, the Book of Enoch is not apocryphal. Wait, okay, how to put this? The Gospel of Hermas, or the Gospel of Barnabas, that would be considered apocryphal, because whilst its authorship isn't as far as I know, I could be wrong, if I'm not correct myself now. Its authorship isn't seen as debated really, but it's not seen as divinely inspired. But the books of Enoch, because they were written more almost 3,000 3,000, 4,000 years after Enoch actually lived, they're seen as pseudepigraphical because their authorship is highly debated. So I've got a whole bunch of these heretical books, and it's not because I'm looking for them for inspiration or anything, but it's interesting to read these and to look through them. Also because I need to refute them and explain what they are so you don't get confused. Especially concerning the books of Enoch. Do not trust those books at all. Some books were considered, again, I believe it was the Gospel of Hernas or something, but some books were considered, I guess, closer to being divinely inspired more than others. For instance, I know some people talk about the Gospel of Barnabas. I really hope I'm saying the right one, and the Gospel of Hernas. They're as close to the canonical books as you can get. I mean, also Psalm 154, maybe? I can't remember, and the Prayer of Manasseh, which is what the East Orthodox has. So there's definitely a spectrum of definitely not canon to canon. And those books are like right there, just outside of being canon. A bunch of other books I have were books about ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. They're quite old, some of these books. They were like printed in the 17 to 1800s. Some of them aren't in print anymore. I had to take that with a little bit of pinch of salt, considering whether or not they may be a bit outdated. But it's definitely old to have it's definitely interesting to have these books here, because something I definitely noticed when I was reading my the Historicity of Genesis book. Well, let me grab it quickly. Okay, something I definitely noticed when I was reading my Authenticity, the Book of Genesis book, this one here. I noticed that the guy, Bill Cooper, he kept referring to this. Sorry, I can't remember his name. But the point is, he keeps referring to this ancient archaeologist who lived in like the 1800s. As a lot of his reference for a lot of his referencing, and it's quite important because back in the 1800s was when I guess the field of archaeology was really starting to expand and start exploring the Middle East, and that it was around the 1800s that the balance between religion and atheism was like starting to like almost be like level, so becoming equally influential and stuff. They were reaching a tipping point, and the guy that he keeps referring to, he's the one who did a huge amount of work when investigating the Middle East. Like he also translated the Nippur flood tablet, which I'll go more into depth at another point in time. But he was seen as one of the big guns of, I guess, archaeology, especially religious archaeology. However, after him, the biblical archaeology took quite a massive hit, and atheistic archaeology started taking over, and people started going in, putting in the idea of, okay, well, the Bible's based off paganism and everything, even though their predecessors were very into proving the Bible was older than paganism, proving the Bible was different from paganism. And it's quite interesting to read books and works from around that point in time to see this balance of almost religion and atheism reaching a tipping point because it's without a doubt a lot of science nowadays is influenced by atheism. A lot. Even I have friends. I've told you friends. I have friends, archaeologists, biblical archaeologists who are working in the Middle East. Like I know one of my Facebook friends is working the Tel Haman site, which is where Saddam is. She knows a group of people who are working at the Shiloh site. No, not Shiloh. Shiloh site, or Shiloh Shechem, can't remember now, where the Ark of the Covenant used to be. So there's definitely religious archaeologists there, biblical archaeologists going around there. But we never really hear about their discoveries in the news, and that's because there's a lot of atheistic influence, because people don't want to prove the Bible is right, which is quite a shame, because there's a huge amount of evidence here. I mean, again, people talk about how there's, like, for instance, it's quite hard to find evidence of Moses, and I will admit it's quite hard to find evidence for him myself. I can't really find anything. But then when you see the evidence they propose for, like, Joseph the son of Jacob, and Abraham, and, well, there's a ton of evidence here for people that you wouldn't even think that there was evidence for, but it's always covered up because of, I guess, the agenda of the media, which is a shame, because so much information is lost. And a lot of people are still influenced by the idea that there's no evidence for Jesus, even though we have more evidence for Jesus than we do for, like, Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar combined, which is, again, quite the shame. If people want hard evidence for the Bible and the proof that the Bible does exist, they just need to look at books like this, okay? I mean, again, pinch of salt here, because the guy does not like Catholicism, but there is plenty of evidence out there, and we need to try and share that evidence out there. And by looking at these ancient books written at this time, in this tipping balance between religion and archaeology, again, the Nippur flood tablet proves evidence of an ancient in ancient accounts of the flood not influenced by paganism, older than any pagan account. It was translated almost 200 years ago, yet no one's heard about this. This is monumental, yet no one hears about this, which is why I want to make a video about it. I want to teach people about it. I want people to be aware of it. I want people to know that there is evidence for the books out there. I mean, Bill Cooper here, the guy who wrote this book, there's a whole series. He's done one about like the book of Judges, the book of Jonah, and I want to look at these books because they're quite interesting. Because if this is like this book, then it's quite interesting. And I guess you could say I'll do the research so you guys don't have to. I mean, yeah, it would be nice. Obviously, you shouldn't just take necessarily everything I say for granted. Don't necessarily. I'm not saying that everything I say is necessarily right. It's got to do your own research, but I'll do what I can to try and, I guess, build a foundation for you guys to build upon and do your own research as well. Definitely. I mean, I've always had a love for archaeology, especially ever since I started watching Indiana Jones. So it's definitely quite nice to combine both biblical studies and archaeology together. Yeah, so expect biblical archaeology videos in future. And I know that there's been some critical response in regards to the video I released yesterday. I just want to make it clear that if you want to get the main thing to get out of that video is you shouldn't be applying the same standards that we have for God. Okay, when I say that God hasn't really killed anyone, I mean our standard of killing. For instance, by the definition of science itself, God is not alive. Okay, the scientific definition of something to be alive is a biological system, I believe it is, that is carrying out metabolic activities with the potential for reproduction and growth. Okay, that's how we know an unborn fetus, a fertilized zygote, is alive. We cannot apply that same standard to God because he is not biological or material, and so we say he's different because he's a spirit, and we say we need to apply a different standard to him. So when I say God has never killed anyone, I don't mean our definition of killing in the sense of depriving something of life by us, okay, or by a material organism. God is different because he's the author of life, okay? I'm not getting confused between what killing and murder is. I know the difference between them. When I say killing, I'm referring to the material side of things, okay? If we kill something, okay? We kill something on accident or on purpose. If it's an animal, that's different because, again, they're not alive in the same way we are. If we kill a person, that's different because we don't have the authority to take life. God does. So I don't want people to get confused because if we say something like God kills, for instance, as I said, technically God doesn't kill children. But if people go out there saying God does kill children, or if someone asks, does God kill children, you agree, it's going to be quite hard to explain. You're going to need to take quite some time to explain why his killing someone is very different from us killing someone. Which is why I think it would be better if we... Sorry, my hand's getting pins and needles from holding the phone so long. Which is why I think it would be a better idea to, I guess, come up with a different word or something to describe actions done by God. So if God carries out justice, which results in lives being taken, or if God gives the authority to someone, like with Joshua in Canaan, and he takes lives through God's authority, we need to come up with a way of distinguishing that from someone claiming to have God's authority but without it, or us taking authority, or us claiming to have the authority to take lives ourselves, because it's very different. With a court of law, you need to be careful that here. If a court derives its authority from God and they take someone's life, we would see that and we see that their verdict is just. We would say they were executing someone because they were executing God's authority on earth. If we see it as unjust, we would consider it killing. So I wouldn't necessarily say that God killing people or taking the lives of someone would be considered executing, because we would associate that too much with the court on earth, in which it can be disagreed with the court on earth, whereas we cannot disagree with the court of God because his court does not make mistakes. So in the end, I just want there to be a way of distinguishing between God's actions and God's actions through people, and then our actions, whether it be our authority or us claiming to be from an authority without being able to prove it. I just want that. For instance, we make a distinguishing between something like apotheosis and theosis, or we make a distinguishing between worshipping and venerating, right? Dulia, protodulia, hyperdulia, and latria, right? I want there to be a distinguishing between God's actions and God's actions through us, and then our actions. Because otherwise, if we say something that, if someone says, did God kill children, and you say yes, that's not going to exactly give the right impression of God, which is why we should come up with a word, I guess, to correctly describe the execution of God's authority by himself and by other people on earth. That way we can show that God is not the same as someone who goes around killing people, or a court that could potentially be disagreed with, who went around killing people wrongly or unjustly. That's the point of this video, effectively. So it's very hot. I'm turning to the Hulk because of this. I've got a bunch of books to help do research in the empirical side of things concerning the Bible, and there's evidence for things as God described them. And we should try and come up with a new word for God's actions to distinguish them from our actions, because otherwise people are just going to get confused. Make sure you guys stay cool in this heat because it'll be quite hot. God bless you all. See you next video, comrades. Until then.